watch you as you drive. Do you know I'm looking? And I can't help but smile. Do you know how much I love you? You put my favorite song on, I put my feet up, and we just sing along. And I can't help but feeling, just loving this moment. Can we stay here forever? I'm loving this moment. Can we stay here together? If I could stop the time, don't you know that I would? 'Cause I'm just loving this moment.
Hello and welcome back to our channel. I'm Ann and I'm one half of Postcards from Our Golden Years. And if you're not familiar with us, my husband Jeff and I, about 2 years ago, we sold almost everything we owned, or gave it away, or donated it. And we moved here to the south of France to retire. And we have been sharing videos about our life and what it took to get here and what it takes to stay here and all of the steps. I've done quite a number of step-by-step videos for you to follow if you're just at the beginning of your journey on how to do what we did. Now, I must preface this by saying Jeff and I are not experts. All we're doing is sharing our experience. How did we do this? How did we take care of that? What did we do with regard to our telephone service? What did we do with regard to our mail from the US? How do we keep in touch with our friends and family? And how did we get on the national health care system? Was it hard? How did we renew our visas? What's it like at an OFII appointment? What is an OFII appointment? Well, if you go back through our vast library of videos, you'll find the answers to all of those questions. So if you're at the beginning of your journey, finding out how you can retire from the United States to lovely France, you're going to want to check out a lot of our past videos. We've got, I think there are probably close to 500 videos in that library. So I called this video Aging in Place, because after you finish purging your life on the other side of the ocean and getting everything over here that you want to get over here and going through the steps, which are often very hard, to finding an apartment that will work for you, that will be enough for you, large enough for you, and putting all the rest of your life in order so that you can go on and live your new life in France happily, stress-free, without a lot of bills and the encumbrances of owning a car and all of that other stuff. After the dust has settled and everything's put away, and maybe you've been sitting there for a year or two, and it's a point where you can finally take a breath and go, okay, now I can just live. I can just enjoy my life. Well, that is the time when you should start thinking about the end. And by the end, I mean the end of your life. I mean, I don't want to get all gloomy here, but as I said, Jeff and I have lived here. At the beginning of April, it will be 2 years. And all of the dust is settled in our apartment. All the things are put away. Now we're at a point where I look at things and I say, you know, I want to replace that with this, or let's take that away and put this here. So now we're getting into the routine, just like we did back in the States, where I feel like moving furniture and I feel like replacing this piece of furniture with that piece of furniture and buying a new picture and hanging a new this or hanging a new that. I'm taking a rest from all of that now, because today I want to talk about a subject that is very important. And it's, what are you going to do when you get too old to take care of yourself? Have you thought about that? Jeff and I are in our early 70s. So I mentioned this to Jeff over breakfast one day last week. What are we going to do? And like a lot of people, he made a joke about it. Oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. And I said, yeah, but what about when you're too old to take care of me? What if something happens to me? Who's going to take care of you? What if something happens to you? Who's going to take care of me? And what if I can't take care of me? But it is something that I think that when you move over here, particularly as an American, you do have to find the time to at least think about. Now, there are some people who are thinking about this before they even make the move. I occasionally get comments or private emails from people who say, oh, do they have assisted living over there? Do they have 55 plus communities over there? Do they have retirement homes? What are you going to do when you get too old? I'll be very honest with you. I don't have the answer. Today, the day that I'm making this video, I have no idea what I'm going to do, what Jeff is going to do, what we're going to do as a couple. We have no idea where we're going to draw the line and say, okay, when we reach this point, this is what we're going to do. The purpose of my video today is to simply bring awareness to the fact that this is something that we have to think about. All of us have to think about it. Now, some of you may be very fortunate. You have very supportive children, siblings who would welcome the thought of taking care of you, paying for your retirement home, or whatever there is here in France. Not everybody is that lucky. For example, I have a mentally challenged son. This is never going to be on my son's radar. Jeff's kids, we have no idea how they will react. Our guess is that they will not be supportive to taking care of us in our retirement. He raised them to be independent children that are now, fully grown, almost middle-aged adults who are just doing all they can to take care of themselves and their own children. The last thing in the world they're thinking about is taking care of their father. And if something happens to their father and it's just me, because we're in a second marriage, I have zero expectation that his children would feel any kind of responsibility for taking care of me. And if you're in a second or third or fourth or whatever marriage you're in, and your spouse has children, and you haven't been with those children for most of their life, you may be feeling the same thing. When I go, are they even going to care? These are things that we all have to think about. And so, again, that's the reason that I've created this video. It was time to just create a video to make everybody take a breath and at least add this to their to-do list. What will we do? Make a plan. When will we decide that one of us or both of us needs to do this? And who are we going to call? What is there in France? Well, I have taken the time in the last week or so to do a little research to find out what there is here in France. Will I give you all the answers? No, I won't give you any answers. I'm not going to tell you how to do anything. I'm simply going to present to you the things that I have learned in my research so that you have some sort of a direction. Maybe you have some words, vocabulary words that will be part of your notes to look into this or look into that. But I think when you reach retirement age, if you're here as retirees, that you need to think about it. And if you don't have children, you're probably in the same situation that Jeff and I are in. It's like, okay, we can certainly afford to live here, and we certainly have enough Social Security that we can afford to live here together or independently. I mean, what are we going to do? Who will we turn to? One of the things that Jeff and I did when it came time to plan our retirement here in France is, knowing our background and knowing the fact that we're pretty much on our own here and for our eternity in this lifetime, we decided we wanted to put ourselves in a situation where we could live independently if and when the day comes that the other partner, our husband, our spouse, our wife, passes on. We didn't want our life to have to be life-changing. So, for example, together with our Social Security, which we are living on primarily, together, we could very easily have afforded to live in an apartment that's twice the size of the apartment we live in here for, $3,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month. Technically, yeah, sure, we could have afforded to do that. However, it was going to take both of our Social Security payments, benefits payments, to cover all of our living expenses, because beyond the rent, there are utilities, there's food, there is the cost of our mutual plan to supplement the healthcare plan. And coming up in this next calendar year, we fully expect that France will start charging us American retirees who did not contribute into the tax system over all of our lifetime of employment here in France, that France is going to ask us to chip in towards inclusion in the national healthcare system. And like most other retirees here in France, we are absolutely so happy to do that. Happy to pay our fair share to be included. We don't know what it's going to be. They haven't decided how much it's going to be, but we figure it's going to be coming up soon. And it's something that we're going to have to budget for. So, yes, technically we could have afforded to live in a much bigger apartment, and we could technically have afforded to buy a car and pay to have it stored in a garage somewhere. We didn't want to spend our money on that. So we intentionally found an apartment that was, I don't want to use the word cheap, but when you get right down to it, it is the word. We wanted to find an apartment that was inexpensive or cheap enough that if something happened to either one of us, we could very easily continue living here for the rest of our lives, assuming that we have the mental capacity and the physical capacity, that we could live here for the rest of our lives and pay all of our expenses to live here in France. And it wouldn't be life-changing to lose our partner. And there are lots of other people like ourselves who put that much thought into deciding where to live. Some of you are very fortunate that you sold your homes in the United States and you came here and you decided not to put it into the purchase of another home so that you'd have all that cash, so to speak, liquid, so that you could pay to travel and do things and pay for rent in a nice apartment and buy extravagant things. And we're happy for you. We wish that we had a house that we could have sold. We're just a little bit jealous that when we got together, we had to start from scratch and that we didn't have a home to sell. Everybody makes choices in their lives, and we're just dealing with the result of the choices that we made over our lifetimes. We know that we've set ourselves up to age in place. We love our apartment. Did we love it when we first saw it? No, we did not love it when we first saw it. We loved the terrace out there, beautiful terrace. That was what made us decide we wanted this apartment. It was a furnished apartment. It was not furnished to our liking. As far as we were concerned, the furnishings were the bare minimum, just for the landlord to be able to get away with calling it a furnished apartment. And so the reality is that we pretty much replaced, I want to say we replaced 95% of the furniture. There are a few odds and end pieces that we didn't replace because even though they don't fit in with a modern, contemporary furnishing or decor, the decor that we selected, they're a little bit eclectic and they sort of add charm to our apartment. The charming antique mirrors and marble top chests, we kept those. There's some things that, as if you've been following our channel, you know, we hated them so much and we didn't want to pay for storage. And we knew that down the road we were going to have to replace them if and when we ever move out of here. So Jeff took them apart. One of them he turned into shelving. It was an armoire. And he took the armoire apart and made it shelving in our guest room. And we store our tumble dryer between the walls of the shelving. And quite frankly, it does more good for us than it did as an armoire. We had to replace the armoire with something bigger for our guest room. And so we did what we had to do to make this apartment an apartment that feels like home to us, that's warm and cozy. And no, our living room is not big enough to roller skate in. When you walk in the door, you're right there in our dining room. They're not big, wide open spaces. And we've seen some apartments like that. We've seen some beautiful apartments like that. And we're a little bit jealous because we didn't want to spend the money to have an apartment like that, but we had other priorities. And we're happy for all of you who had a home to sell or had the wherewithal and you rented big, luxurious apartments. And we're also, some of you were jealous of that second bathroom. But we are learning to live, I think by 2 years now, we have learned to live with one bathroom. It's all part of aging in place. We decided when we met with our landlord, before our landlord gave us the apartment, there were a number of people who wanted this apartment. And I don't know if the landlord and management company did Zoom meetings with all of them. But we filled in our application and we submitted our dossier and our Garant Me guarantee. And we wrote this heartfelt letter to the landlord telling her why she should rent the apartment to us. And before she decided on us over all of the other people, she called for a Zoom meeting with us. So we were in the United States and she was, I don't know whether she was here in France or where she was, but we did a Zoom meeting with her and she was convinced that we would love her apartment as much as she and her siblings and her family had loved it. The apartment, I don't know if any of you know this, but our apartment's on the second floor of a building. And it used to be part of another apartment. It was all one big apartment on the second floor. And our landlord basically grew up spending her summers here in Nice with her family. And when both of her parents finally passed away, apparently she and her siblings decided that they wanted to keep the apartment in Nice. They live in other parts of the world. And they decided that I guess one way they could do it is to split the apartment in half, rent out half to cover the expenses in the other half. And so they were looking for a tenant who planned to live here for a long, long time. And when she interviewed us, she asked us what our thoughts were, what our plans were, and we said, we're looking for a place to rent for the rest of our lives. And we were very serious, and we're still very serious. Jeff and I joke that the only time we're leaving here is in a little box. That's how we're leaving this apartment. And hopefully we'll be fortunate enough that we'll be able to stay in this apartment until our last days come. But who knows? I don't know. He doesn't know. We don't know. We're basically very healthy people, and we try to take very good care of ourselves. And this YouTube channel, as many of you who follow the channel know, this is my way of keeping my mental faculties sharp, so that hopefully I don't end up with Alzheimer's. And editing these videos, for me anyway, mentally, it's satisfying my need to keep my mind sharp so that I won't succumb to Alzheimer's. Is there some belief that it's going to happen to me? Probably not. And in talking to my family doctor back in the US, he told me not to worry about it. But it's something that the older I get, the more it crosses my mind, because I watched my mother pass away from Alzheimer's. And it was very painful loss for my brothers and I. And for me, I was right there in Florida, watching her go from living independently in a 55-plus community to then moving to assisted living, to then reaching a point where her dementia caught up with her to full-blown Alzheimer's, and she ended up in a nursing home, in skilled nursing. So I watched that progression, and it started when she was around 80, and she passed away when she was 89. So she had 9 years of that aging process, and in the last few years, it probably advanced the most. I don't want to end my life that way. And so I try to consciously now, in my early 70s, do the right things, so that I won't be a burden to somebody, and that I will have planned, put something in place, if only written down in a diary, in a notebook. Put some path in place for my later years. So what options are there available here in France? The first one is called an EHPAD. And there are several kinds of EHPADs. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Établissement d'hébergement pour personnes âgées dépendantes, meaning residential establishments for dependent elderly people. So those are the 4 types of retirement homes. That's the retirement home system here in France. In addition, here in France, there are what is called EHPAS. And these are care homes for elderly people who don't require as much medical care or medical attention as those in the EHPADs. So the EHPADs, those are for people who don't require as much medical attention. At the other end of the spectrum, there are also what's called Unité de Soins de Longue Durée. USLD is the abbreviation. And those are for people who need constant care. So this might be the equivalent of skilled nursing in the United States. And these are often attached to a hospital. Overall, elderly care homes here in France are referred to as maisons de retraite. For short, I would say it's like an umbrella term for a retirement home. How many of these are there in France? Well, there are around 7,500 EHPADs. That was the first one that I described, where there were 4 different kinds of EHPADs. There are about 7,500 of those, and around 600,000 residents. And they say that the average stay is 2.5 years. So I guess on average, when people are suffering from certain health issues, they enter an EHPAD, and maybe based on my research, half of them have dementia or Alzheimer's. As far as the public and the private split, my research shows that there are around 50% of these are public, 30% are private, and 20% of them are run by nonprofit groups. So what does it cost to enter an EHPAD? The median cost, based on my research presently, is around 1,800 euros a month for a private, and it's up to 2,000 for a nonprofit private space. Private fees run between 2,000 and 3,000 a month, euros, of course, and they can reach as high as 12,000 or more, depending on the location, depending on how luxurious, depending on the level of care. The highest fees in France tend to be around Île-de-France, which is in the Paris area, Corsica, Provence, Côte d'Azur, which is our area as well. And the lowest fees are in the Loire Valley, the Val de Loire, Brittany, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, where the average is maybe around 1,700 euros per month. So you may be wondering, is there assistance available for this? And there are some agencies. One of them is called the Agence Régionale de Santé, and the other is called Direction Générale de l'Action Sociale. And they share certain responsibilities for the financial means of these residences. The agencies are taking care of financing for the homes, but the residents pretty much have to take care of their own costs and fees. And it depends on their level of dependency, and they have different dependency levels from 1 to 6. You should remember that healthcare costs throughout all of this, once you get on the healthcare system, all of your costs, I guess through the end of your life, are covered by the assurance maladie. So once you're basically on CPAM, that takes care of your medical needs. And it's the costs for the residents, for living, the fees for living in these residencies that you have to bear on your own, or by some means. The homes here in France, they are inspected regularly. They require authorization from their local department council, and also the regional Agence de Santé, which is, the abbreviation is the ARS. Now, private EHPADs that belong to different groups or societies, they have between 80 and 350 different establishments in the country, and they have a presence all over Europe. The largest shareholder in France group is called Orpea, and it's a Canadian pension fund. And also, Peugeot has some part ownership of that group as well. There is another group that takes care of that these fall under, umbrella group, and that is Corian. And Corian's largest shareholder is Crédit Agricole, the bank Crédit Agricole. And it's also partly owned by the Canadian Pension Fund. Now, you should also be advised that just like in the US, there are often scandals that surround these retirement homes or homes for the elderly. And France is not without its own scandals. That first company that I mentioned, Orpea, because of a book that came out in January of 2022 that detailed a lot of the abuses in a home that was owned by Orpea. These homes have been under the spotlight here in France. Of course, Orpea disputed the claims and described them as outrageous and untrue. We go through the same things in the US. When my mother was living in assisted living, there were all kinds of scandals in different conglomerates or umbrella companies or big corporations that owned assisted living facilities. And before I moved her into assisted living, I had to do a lot of research there to just see what kind of stories there were about these particular assisted living facilities. I had to look literally at the different claims on there was a way in the United States that you could go into the history of claims that were filed in the state against those nursing homes, and you could read all of the different complaints that had been filed, and you could read charges that had been filed and legal lawsuits and all kinds of things. You could read all of that. So apparently here in France, those investigations exist as well. Just as an aside, the book that came out was called Les Fossoyeurs, and it included claims that residents' food and adult diapers were rationed, and that people were poorly cared for, and staff was untrained. The firms were taking measures to boost their bottom line. Just like things that we heard in the United States with regard to nursing homes and assisted living facilities when I was doing the research for my mother. So as a result of that book that came out, there is a lot of spotlight, which is a good thing. There's a lot of spotlight on these homes, these EHPADs here in France. So that's a good thing. But still, it's a decision that we have to make. We have to decide, do we need one of these? And if we're the only ones who are right now are advocates, who's going to look into these places for us? So one of the realities that a lot of us have to be concerned with, particularly if we have a spouse or if you don't speak a lot of French, when you move to one of these homes, you're not always going to find people who speak in English. And so it will become more of a problem for you not speaking French to move into one of these homes and have the staff that only speak to you in French. So this is something, it's another reason why you need to learn as much French as you can in your lifetime before you reach that point in your life. I recently read about an organization. I mean, there's no one organization here in France that has a standardized service for finding English-speaking homes here in France. But I read about a program there's an English newspaper that some of us get called Connexion. And it's a French newspaper. It's not always accurate, but occasionally it has interesting articles, and it's published in English for English speakers here in France. So they had an article, and the article that I found actually goes back to 2016. So this was 10 years ago at this point. And they were talking about an association in the La Dordogne, Le Partage. And this organization wanted to start a building project for people who wanted to support each other in cooperative housing. And they built this accommodation in 2010. Actually, they started the building of the project in 2010. And based on the article that I read, they had hoped that the project would be complete by the end of 2016, because that's when this article was published. In this project, everybody would have their own living quarters, their own living area, and there would be plenty of what they're calling chambre d'hôte, which was predated bed and breakfast here in France. When you would travel back in the day when I first started coming to France, you could rent a chambre d'hôte, which was like a room in somebody's home, where they would allow you to sleep in one of their bedrooms and serve you breakfast in the morning and maybe an aperitif in the evening. Anyway, this project was going to offer accommodations for people who wanted to be part of the project, and then there would be a set-up chambre d'hôte for your guests, I guess people who would come and visit you. And then there would be communal facilities. So I guess there would be a kitchen where you would have communal kitchen, communal dining area, maybe a communal living room. I guess the one thing that comes to mind would be the Golden Girls, if you watch that on television in the US. The Golden Girls, but maybe on a larger scale. And so everybody had their own room, and it's sort of everybody looked after each other. And so you sort of had your own built-in set of friends that lived with you in this little housing community that was created. And I like that concept. If I were a widow or a widower, I think that would be great, especially if I was still sharp and did not want to go to an EHPAD or need an EPAS. So here in the Riviera, at least based on what I was reading, there was also one other one. Now, there may have been more since 2016. One called the Sunny Bank Retirement Home, and it is at Mouans-Sartoux, which is outside of Cannes. Now that one hoped to open its doors in 2010. I don't know if it's open. One other place that I found was called Le Parc de Mougins, it's run by the Senior Santé Group in Mougins, which is here on the Côte d'Azur. I believe it's not too far from Cannes, maybe outside Nice. And that is a privately run home, and it has medical care there that's available. So there is that as well. They claim to have a bilingual staff. Not everybody is bilingual. So apparently they're saying, at least back in the research that I had found, that they had some English-speaking people there, but they didn't want to be considered a bilingual facility. So these are things that you have to think about. We're just at the very beginning of this, and basically it's me who's doing the research. I'm doing it for both of us. I'm the researcher in our marriage. So I go out and I search for the information, And then I bring it to breakfast time with Jeff and we talk about it and decide, is this something we want to do? Is it something we want to write down? Is it something I just want to do a video about? Is it something that we want to bank in a little memory box or something to look at down the road? So, I mean, that, again, is part of the purpose of this video. It's to get you to have this awareness that it's something that you need to plan. Because back in the US, when you were packing up all your boxes and deciding, you know, what clothes to bring, what shoes to bring, what art to bring, what furniture to bring or not bring, this was not on any of our lists for the most part. I would bet the big majority of you didn't sit down with your spouse or significant other or even alone and say, before I move to Nice or to the south of France or to Paris or wherever you settle in France, let me make a plan for this so I have that in place before I leave. I would venture to say that most of us did not do that. So one of the questions that you may have is, as a non-EU citizen, someone who's living here on a long stay visa with a titre de séjour, carte de séjour, are we eligible to live in these care homes or homes for the elderly? And based on my research, absolutely, as long as we are here legally and we have a valid carte de séjour, absolutely we are eligible to live in these homes. And as long as you can pay for it as well. Now, France does offer some financial aid for people who can't afford this. You would need to apply to your local Centre Communal d'Action Sociale. Had to look at my notes. And the abbreviation for that is CCAS. And also, they will transfer your application to the department council, which will carry out an assessment and determine your financial and your familial situation to determine if they can help you. So what are the qualifications to live in one of these places? First of all, you need to be over the age of 65 or over the age of 60 and unfit for work. You have to have less money at your disposal than it would cost to live in one of these care homes. You have to have a valid, as I said, you have to have a valid residence permit, long stay visa, carte de séjour. You have to have lived in the department where the home that you're considering is located for at least 3 months. So you have to live in that area. You can't just go to some other town and decide I want to go live here and apply to live in that home. You have to have lived in that community. You have to have that valid residence permit to live in France, and you have to have lived in that community for at least 3 months. And you have to find a place that will offer you a space. Now, just like in the US, there were nursing homes. When I was dealing with this for my mother, there were nursing homes that only had a limited number of spaces for people that were paying their bill on Medicaid. For example, when my mother first started out in assisted living, she was private pay, and it was literally draining her portfolio to the tune of about $8,000 a month for her to live in assisted living. Once she became more incapacitated and she had to be moved to skilled nursing, her estate attorney that I was working with advised me that we needed to find some means of preserving some of her assets and get her on Medicaid so that Medicaid would pay for her care in the skilled nursing facility. So we had to shelter a bunch of her money in different programs that would not be penalized or that would not disqualify her from getting Medicaid and being able to live under this. But there were only so many Medicaid beds in these nursing homes in the United States. Well, the same goes for France. Here in France, there are a limited number of homes that are accredited to accommodate people who are receiving this aide sociale, the social assistance, the help, the financial assistance. And generally, those aren't going to be the private establishments. And some of these programs will also accept the fact that you have whatever funds you have to contribute to it, and they'll just give you the additional financial assistance to help you with those expenses. So that if you can't pay for all of it, you'll just get enough aid to cover the excess that you can't afford to pay. But the general rule, now this is on updated information that I found that's based a little bit more recently, as of 2022, they say that in order for you to live in those homes, for the most part, if you're not an EU citizen, you should be able to cover around 90% of the costs. You should be able to cover at least 90% of the costs and have a minimum of 110 euros left after covering the expenses of living in one of those homes. So, for example, if the home costs $1,800 a month, you should be able to pay for around 90% of it and still have 110 euros left each month to cover, I guess, incidental expenses. So I hope that my video has given you some things to think about as we're all aging here in France. It's not all sunshine and butterflies all the time. Yes, it's a wonderful life that we've all chosen for ourselves. I hope you're finding your new life here to be wonderful and all that you dreamed of or hoped for. Every now and then we have to deal with some of the realities of aging. Whether you're aging here in France or somewhere else in Europe or back in the United States. But for those of you who are like us, where you've said goodbye to the US, you have no plans to go back, even when you get very, very, very old and can't take care of yourself, you need to start thinking about a plan. Because if you wait until you reach the point where you need to put that plan into action, unfortunately, the reality is you may not be mentally able to do it. So you need to take notes, make notes, do some research. Even if you do all the research and just set it aside in a folder that says, to my children, read this when I get old. Whatever it is you need to do, you need to think about it because it is a part of aging. I hope that you've gotten something out of this video. If you have comments, if you have concerns, if you have suggestions, if you're dealing with, if you're a younger person and you've been dealing with your parents here in France and you've gone through some of this research that maybe I haven't found yet, please share it in the comments below. I'm sure others, including my husband and I, would certainly love to know more as we continue doing our research as the years go on. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.